downtown where you can get a date for 50, 60, 70, even 80% off the original social marketplace price. Coming to paperback and e-readers, Isis Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Isis Dark Incubus at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. A group of women on a podcast wanted to tell men who made under $50,000 a year that they shouldn't be dating women.
So if you're making $50,000, don't date. Ooh. I'm just being for real. You're not ready to date.
Again, I'm with you.
You're not ready to date. You're not ready to date because courtship costs.
Okay.
Everything costs. Okay. You can go for 22 walks in the park. Eventually, shorty is going to need a sip of something. She's going to be thirsty. This bottle of water is $3 in Atlanta. Let's not play. So if you don't have any expendable cash, don't date. And whatever that looks like for you, you might only make $50,000, but you live in a shoe. And now you got expendable cash. Or get you a bottom of the barrel that's going to date you when you have no money. If she doesn't have the expectation, and I'm going to tell you this right now, enjoy it while it lasts because eventually you're going to want to run. Because she doesn't stretch you. She doesn't make you the man that you need to become. She allows you to be this stagnant dude in the same jeans for days. You know what I'm saying?
Be cutting up.
I'm
just
just
talk about
saying.
me.
Now on this podcast, this heavy-set Asian or Hispanic woman, I can't really tell, wants to tell men who make $50,000 a year or less that they shouldn't date. And according to her, these men who make $50,000 a year or less shouldn't date because, according to her, courtship costs. Now, this woman basically has a completely distorted picture of dating and relationships that was possibly enabled by the possible single mother household that she comes from. Because only a person who comes from a single mother household would give us an unrealistic perception of dating and relationships like this, and only a person with a completely distorted picture of reality would go out here and make a statement that a man needs to make more than $50,000 a year in order to go out and date. Now, what this woman really doesn't understand is that most Western men don't make $50,000 a year or more in this society. No, when it comes to most Western men, the most that they make these days is about $45,000 a year. And when it comes to most young men like those of her generation, the most that they make possibly is about $30,000 to $35,000 a year, because many of those men are just starting out in life. And because most of those men are just starting out in life, they don't really have a lot of money in the beginning because they're just getting themselves started and they're just starting out on their jobs. But you can't explain this to this modern woman because this modern woman really doesn't have a good understanding of how life works. No, because this woman has basically grown up watching a lot of Disney princess movies and a lot of different kinds of stuff like these soap operas and possibly reading these romance novels and watching shows in reruns like Sex and the City. She's sitting there thinking that there is some rich Mr. Big who is going to go out here and see her from afar, sweep her off her feet, and be able to take her to happily ever after. However, that man doesn't exist because that man is a social construct created by Madison Avenue in Hollywood. And because that man is an imaginary social construct of Madison Avenue in Hollywood, he just doesn't exist. Unfortunately, you can't tell many of the girls from single mother households like this that this guy is not real, because they see that guy in many of these movies and television shows, and they believe that there are guys out here making all of this money where they got $50,000 a year, but that guy, it just does not exist at all, because if you look at the statistics for salaries, there are only a small percentage of men who make $50,000 a year or more in this society, and there's only maybe about 3 or 4% of those men who make $100,000 a year or more. So, according to this woman's logic, no men in this society should date because most of the majority of men, again, don't make anything under about $45,000 a year when you look at at the average American man's salary. And many of those men, they are impeded in the job market because a lot of women like this are in these companies working in places like human resources, and these are the women who construct the blocks of what I call the HR brick wall that keeps many of those men from being able to go out here and make more than $50,000 a year. Because many of these same women, when those men go to apply for these jobs and interview for these jobs, they get contempt expressed to them by women like this who think that these men are beneath them. And because those women think that those men are beneath them, what they do is try to deny those men an opportunity to work at these jobs, not understanding that when it comes to the so-called high-value man that they so-called want, what that man is built over time, and it takes that man years to get to the level where he can even say that he makes $50,000 a year. Because again, the average American man starts out at maybe $25,000 to $35,000 a year. If he's lucky, he can get to the $45,000 a year level at an entry-level job, depending on his education and skills, if he can get the job, because these women erect the HR brick wall. And those men, oftentimes, it takes years for them to develop their skills. It takes years for them to develop their craft to get to the point where they can make the six figures that these women so-called covet. But many of these women, again, because they have an unrealistic picture of dating and relationships, they sit there and believe, oh, this guy is just going to materialize out of thin air, instead of understanding that a man needs time invested in him to reach a point where he can go out here and make that kind of disposable cash that this woman is so eager to spend. Now, this woman sits here and talks about how these men don't have money to participate in a courtship, but she doesn't even understand what a courtship is. Now, in my book, The Woman Crisis, I explain what an actual courtship is, and a courtship is where a woman exclusively decides to get involved with a man who has been vetted by the family and has spent time talking to the father about pursuing a serious relationship with her. And in a courtship, both the man and the woman are going to be exclusive to each other. This is what they agree to, in the hopes of possibly creating a courtship to see if they are compatible for marriage. And courtships only cost because the man is investing his time in a woman who he will consider to be his wife. That's something that this woman doesn't understand, because she doesn't understand there's a difference between dating and courtship. A date is something that a man does in order to see and assess if this woman will be someone who can reflect positively on him and will behave in a way that shows respect for that man, so that he can possibly consider getting involved with that woman for a possible courtship. And that a courtship, again, comes after the man goes out here and talks to the father about getting his consent to further get involved with his daughter. That's what this woman doesn't understand, because she doesn't understand that the first date is supposed to be something that is signed off on by the parents after they meet with this man. But because this woman possibly never had a father in her life to model manhood for her, this is why she has this completely distorted picture of dating and relationships, and believes that a man who makes $50,000 a year or less should not be dating. Because if this woman had an actual father in her life to model manhood for her, she would have a completely different perception of relationships because she would see a relationship modeled for her. And if she saw a relationship modeled for her, then she would have a more realistic picture of men, this more realistic picture of manhood, a more realistic picture of masculinity, to understand that when it comes to men, men don't really make all of this big money. No, when it comes to most men are doing the best they can to make a living until they get a break. And those men who are out here, they're busting their backsides, going out here working as hard as they can. And when they hear a woman like this, many of those men shake their heads and leave women like this to be single for the rest of their lives. And they leave these women to be single for the rest of their lives because these women have no real perception of reality. No, they sit there and talk about how courtship costs, and that whole statement basically shows how full of it they are, because while these women will sit there and tell men that they make $50,000 a year or less, they shouldn't be dating, their actions will tell a completely different story, because many of these same women who sit there and talk about how men who make under a certain salary shouldn't be dating, many of these same women will be out here with a no-job Pookie or Ray Ray, and as they're involved with this no-job Pookie or Ray Ray, what they will be doing is dropping the skid mark jockey thong and allowing that man to put his carbon rod in the atomic waste reactor and participating in some nuclear fusion. And after they participate in that nuclear fusion, these same women will be going out here buying that Pookie with no job clothes, buying that Pookie with no job shoes, going out here getting his hair cut or getting his hair braided, and buying him all of the PS5 games that he will take back to his mama's house and play as he's sitting in a racing car bed. And they will be allowing this guy to basically be in their lives, blowing their backs out, and they'll sit there and tell all of us that we need to make more than $50,000 a year to date, but they'll be out here going out with this guy, covering all of his bills, and that just shows how completely full of it these kind of women are. They'll sit there and say, oh, a man who makes $50,000 a year shouldn't date, but they don't even understand how economics work. I mean, again, $50,000 a year is not a lot of money when you think about it as related to bills, but it's way more than most men make these days, because a lot of guys out here, again, when they start out, especially young guys, the most you're going to make is maybe, again, $45,000 if you have a master's degree or a PhD, if you can get that kind of job and you're connected. But the average guy is making about $36,000, $37,000, $38,000 a year. And if those guys decide to go out and think about considering a relationship, these guys are basically having to deal with these modern women whose whole perception of reality is so distorted and so just twisted that they're sitting there thinking that the only guys out here who they can date are these guys who make $50,000 or more, when in actuality, once again, I'm going to repeat it again, there are not that many men who make that kind of money, and there are not that many men out here who make six figures in the United States. That's statistically been proven as related to this country, as related to economics, but many of these modern women don't really understand this because they have been enabled for years by a gynocentric society filled with simps. And these simps, what they do in order to try to keep getting the attention of women is continue to enable their lies by making them believe that they have all of this money, when in actuality many of these guys are struggling out here, and there is no high value man out here. There is no simp charming who like Mr. Big on Sex and the City. No, those guys are few and far between, and in a lot of cases those guys, because they have their pick, basically just go out and blow the backs out of chicks more attractive than this, and leave these women like this who are heavy set and just average at best right there to sit there and with their delusions and leave them to sit there in their delusions because they can choose somebody far better than her. But you can't explain that to these women who want to sit here and say that they need a guy who makes all of this money because they want to go out here and live a high life of going to places like Magnolia Bakery and five-star restaurants and wearing designer clothes. They want to be like Carrie Bradshaw, not understanding that Carrie Bradshaw is a fictional character made by Candace Bushnell, who basically herself said that the lifestyle that she put in that book is not attainable or even something that any woman could get. So a lot of these women out here are chasing fantasies, and they don't understand that that's not the reality. No, there is. If many of these guys, if they have that kind of money, the best you can do is a guy who makes a baby about $25,000, $35,000 or $45,000 a year. That's all you're gonna get in a man. And the whole thing is, no guy is gonna come out here being already established. No, when it comes to men, men have to be built over time. And that's something many women don't understand. When you're going to seek a man out here for a relationship to lead into marriage, you gotta go out here and work towards building with that man. That's the way God created relationships to be. He created relationships for you to be in your youth, to be with a man as his helpmeet and help him build things and also help him be able to continue passing the gospel on to the next generation. Sadly, these modern women have not been taught about their role in God's order. They have not been taught about their purpose in God's order. No, what they're doing is getting caught up in the idolatry of the world system. And as they've gotten caught up in the idolatry of the world system, they're out here looking to commodify a relationship, hoping to find some social construct of a six-figure man or a seven-figure man, and hoping that they can go out here and find this guy who will give them all of the amenities of luxury. Unfortunately, what they don't understand is that they have been misled by the devil into going out here and looking to chase after a fantasy that basically takes away the best years of their life. Because that's what's happening here to this woman as I'm speaking. She's gonna miss out on the very best years of her life, her prime years, going out here thinking that there's some simp charming out here who will give her a better deal. But what's going to happen to her is she's going to wind up hitting the wall. And after she hits the wall, she's going to get a raw deal because she's going to realize she missed out on many quality men who were in the beginning struggling as they start, but never really wanting to work with him towards encouraging him to get to the finish line. And that's when she'll realize that she basically screwed up her entire life, like many of these other women out here who are part of the 70% of black women who are single, and also a part of the majority of Western women who are becoming single and miserable because they basically bought into a lot of false ideas and false concepts from Madison Avenue in Hollywood. And as they bought into these false constructs and false ideals, they are just trying to make this into something real. But you can't make this into anything real because, again, they have no understanding of men, and they have no understanding of men because they have no father in their life, because only a woman who has no father in her life is going to say a man who makes $50,000 a year or less shouldn't be dating, because the majority of men out here basically are only going to make $50,000 a year or less, and that's what you're going to have to deal with. And in many cases, these women basically wind up alienating the men out here because they don't want to invest in a man. What they don't understand is that if you, again, want a certain kind of man who makes a certain kind of money, you have to invest in that man. And again, you have to invest in helping that man build, but they don't want to invest in helping a man as related to knocking down this HR brick wall so that men can get jobs, so they can go out here and make the money that they so-called want. Because again, if you want a certain kind of guy who makes a certain kind of money, he's got to be able to get access to the job market. And a lot of guys can't get access to the job market because you have women who are the gatekeepers, and these gatekeepers keep the men from being able to go to work. So these women basically create a paradox for themselves, and they're sitting there in this paradox, not really seeing how they are their own worst enemy, and they are the ones keeping themselves from being with the kind of man that they want. Now, if you want to learn why women like this wind up becoming with this whole dysfunctional mindset, you can pick up my book, The Woman Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Woman Crisis at other online booksellers like Smashware's The iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you want to learn why women like this will be single for the rest of their lives, you can pick up my book, Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find Why 70% of Black Women Are Single at other online booksellers like Smashware's The iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you'd like to see me make more videos like this, which somebody requested but did not want to pay the Cash App for, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, Illuminati on Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, Illuminati on Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Coming to paperback and e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.